have to be honest, every good thing I've ever done in my career, and me ultimately flying on New Shepard, was because of this community. And I think it's worth acknowledging the power of getting everybody together and doing the things that we are doing. One thing I learned though is it's not sometimes so quick. And revolutions sometimes take decades, but they do happen. So what I wanted to talk about today was, obviously, I have some beautiful videos and photos of my flight I'd love to share and tell you about the sort of stories of flying. But I also thought it's really important to maybe talk about the revolution that's about to begin in human spaceflight. And in fact, that's actually the second revolution that I've been involved in. Clay alluded to my work on small spacecraft. So I wanted to just, if I may, begin with talking about unmanned, uncrewed spacecraft for a moment, and talk about some of the things that happened in the industry in the last 20 years in automatic vehicles, satellites, and then we can use that to talk about some context for what's going to happen, I think, in human flight. So one of the things that I did when because of actually my work here at IAC and Space Generation, I was actually the conference organizer for I think 6 or 7 years. At some point, a gentleman who happened to be running a NASA center in NASA Ames, General Pete Warden, said, hey, you're a weird guy that keeps showing up to these conferences unpaid, doing all of this stuff. Would you actually like a job? And so I ended up at NASA Ames, where I was working on a bunch of really cool, innovative concepts. One of them was a conversation about why, at the time, 2008, were our space capabilities still expensive, programs were often late, and it didn't seem that we were doing too much at the time. And so we tried a bunch of radical concepts, and one of those was this concept of PhoneSat, where we put an Android phone initially in a vacuum chamber to see what would happen. This is an early generation Motorola Droid, if people remember that from a long time ago. But we put it in a vacuum chamber, and to our surprise, it still worked in the vacuum of space. So ultimately we said, well, let's try putting one in space. And so we did that. This is a balloon test where we put, if you can kind of see it, there's the phone there's a little silver line in the top inside that cube. Oh, how do I go back? What happened there? Oh, that's right. Okay. I thought I did that. So you can see there's that little bar in there, and that is the phone. Actually, the entire phone. We didn't even do anything to it. We just put the phone in this CubeSat. We tested it on a high altitude balloon, and then put three of them in orbit as free-flying satellites. So what was cool about that was that at the time was probably one of the highest capability spacecraft in orbit. We had a gigahertz processor. I don't think at the time I knew of any spacecraft that had a gigahertz processor, had 16 gigabytes of RAM, had 128 gigabytes of internal storage, had an 8 megapixel camera. At that time, the Mars rover had a 2 megapixel camera. So this is a photo that we took. We actually wrote an app that we put on the App Store to be the flight software. It took a photo, took a bunch of photos. Using AI, we picked the best photo, had it then, I actually feel like the AI failed because this wasn't the best photo, but then it downloaded it via ham radio operators over UHF to ham radio operators all around the world, and they sent us little chunks of the picture. So there's also like a crowdsourced volunteer campaign to get the data. So every person got a little chunk of the picture, we assembled it, and this is the picture partway through being assembled from those little chunks received from operators around the world. So if you think about it, we had a high capability spacecraft that took $500 for the phone, about $3,000 US for the extra hardware to package it up and make it safe for launch, and about $75,000 for the launch. So we had built a $75,000 spacecraft that was basically Sputnik, but with a camera, and an app store, an entire development environment where you could write software. So this was really interesting. But remember at the time also people kind of laughed at us and thought, well, what does it really do? So like all people in Silicon Valley, we left NASA and started a company in a garage just down, this is about a mile down the road from where Apple was founded. And we built what people now know as the company Planet Labs and Planet. So this is one of my favorite photos in the correct orientation as it was taken. And I'll talk about perspective when I get to the space flight. We'll let this picture sink in for a minute because I want to come back to this later in the talk. But this is two of our Dove spacecraft going into orbit. And this this is actually one of the cool things about launching from the space station. Most planet launches now are direct orbital insertions from a vehicle, but sometimes in the early days we launched from the ISS. You get these really, really cool photos. So this is an actual shot through the window of the space station by an astronaut on board after they deployed the satellites. So it's like really amazing to kind of see your own spacecraft being pushed out into space. So Planet today still is a viable company. It is about to go on the stock market, on the NASDAQ. But this is the first picture we got. Compare that to the PhoneSat picture we took. This picture wasn't much more expensive for us. If the PhoneSat was about the price of a laptop computer, the Dove satellites were about the price of a Honda Civic. So not terribly expensive, but reasonably affordable spacecraft, and several zeros cheaper than most other spacecraft in Earth observation at the time. So this photo was taken in 2013, if I remember correctly, on our first launch, Dove 1. And to this day, we still take many, many, many more pictures. This is a solar farm in Chile. This is one of my favorite places in the world, the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. This is Western Australia with some fires. One of the cool things about Planet's data is that Planet is the only company that takes a photo of every place on the Earth every day, every single day. So if there's an event like a fire or a landslide or an earthquake, we have the photo of the day of, the day before, and the day after. And that is the value of launching a large constellation that allows you to take photos of everything all the time. So huge humanitarian and climate change agency that we get from having this kind of data. And then this is actually Dubai in 2015. You can actually see a whole bunch of A380s on the runway there. You know, Dubai probably has changed significantly in the last 6 years from this photo, but I think it's a really cool shot that we took when we were testing the system of this area where we are today. So just to cap up that little history on spacecraft, when we were doing the PhoneSat, we had this crazy vision. There's a guy named Alan Keyes who had a statement that we tend to, as a human race, we tend to overestimate short-term progress and underestimate long-term progress. And so when we were doing PhoneSat, we had a vision that one day there might be 100 nanosatellite or small spacecraft startups. If you fast forward to today, there are probably at least nearly 200 rocket companies alone, and well over 2,000 new space companies that have emerged in the last decade. And if you look at this is from our friends at Bryce Tech. I got this from Manny, who many of you know. This is the launch rate of small spacecraft over the last 10 years. And I want to come back to this graph again when we talk about human spaceflight. So I think this is like a really amazing revolution that has happened in this industry over the last 10 or so years. But it took a long time, and you know, at my very first IAC, I was in a group of students, and someone was coming along with the camera saying, "What's your vision for space?" And I think there were about 20 students, and they were filming each student. And I was panicking, like, oh, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? And when they got to me, I blurted out that I wanted to make space travel as easy as catching a bus. And I actually put that on my website. It's been on my website for 20 years now. And what I liked about the work that we did at Planet and the work that's happening in the larger community is we've at least made access to valuable data and intelligence about our world accessible and affordable. And certainly in the small mass class of 100, less than 100 kilogram spacecraft, there's a lot of activity happening. So what I find really exciting now is that we're now entering the era where we're getting into thousands of kilograms of really big things going into space. Obviously the Starlink launches from SpaceX are really impressive, Dragon and so on. So I see this history playing out again, just on a larger scale. Just to cap off what I do, I'm now at a venture fund called DCBC, as Clay mentioned. We invest in a bunch of companies. Planet was actually a portfolio company of DCBC before I joined them. Rocket Lab is also, just as you know, it's a New Zealand-based launch company, just went on the stock market. Capella Space is a radar company. That's the next sort of low-hanging fruit after optical, and a bunch of other work here. So let's now move on to the spaceflight part. So I had met, I know Clay, of course, and many of the other Blue Origin people from this community who show up at the IAC, and I persistently asked them when they would be ready to fly. And I was always told, well, just join the mailing list, and you'll find out when, when everyone else finds out that we're flying. But actually, in in March of this year, Clay and one of his colleagues, Aaron Cornell, who many of you know, called and said that our founder, Jeff Bezos, will be flying in July. Would you like to fly next? And I said yes. So I was fortunate to join this amazing crew of people, including Bill Shatner and Glenda Fries and Audrey Powers from Blue. And this is the launch site out in Van Horn, Texas. It's actually a really lovely place. It's high desert in the middle of sort of south center of the United States, and the sunrises and sunsets are just beautiful. So even on launch day, when we're walking out to the launch site, it's one of the most beautiful places you can imagine being. And then this is a photo of our vehicle taking off. I have some videos, I think. So those of you who don't know, this is a suborbital vehicle, and not to, I think, paraphrase, Clay could probably speak to this better, but Blue Origin's work is to sort of follow the same trajectory that I talked about with the nanosatellites, to build ever larger capability by starting small and doing things often. And just like the planet where we iterated many times with our spacecraft and launched multiple generations sequentially, they're getting experience with their vehicles. So they have plans for a space station and all of these other cool things, but this vehicle is their suborbital demonstrator. And this is the flight trajectory. So at apogee, we fly up to about 106 kilometers. The capsule separates. We have about 4 minutes of weightlessness, and then we touch down. You'll see this in the video when we land. We actually land with some air cushions that throw up a lot of dust, but it's a nice soft landing back on the ground with parachutes, and then some retro rockets, cold gas retro rockets that create a cushion of air. So this is us driving out. I think there was a retired tech executive had taken a job as an Uber driver and drove us out to the site. So that's Jeff Bezos driving. Here because this is really cool. So in my seat you could see there was the launch tower and then the capsule. I was seated on the side away from the tower where the helicopter was flying, so I had that cool shot of me through the window. But also had this other really special, unique experience that no one else had. So as many of you might know, rockets, they want to push the flame, the exhaust of the rocket away from the rocket so acoustic waves and energy don't reflect back at the rocket. So as we're about to take off, I can see glow on the ceiling of the engines. So you'll see in the next video I actually get, and I look down at the ground, and maybe I took that video out. Anyway, I look down and I can see this beautiful plume of smoke and the orange flame blowing out of this flame trench out to the side of the vehicle right underneath me. And then as the rocket took off, just like this, the sun was directly behind it, probably like this, and the sunlight was shining back onto the white plume of smoke. And there was a silhouette of our rocket with me inside it, black on white, on the plume of smoke. And as we ascended, I could see myself lifting off in a perfect black and white cartoon, which is one of the most beautiful things. And only I on the launch saw that. So I want future flyers who fly on New Shepard, try and get that seat because it's really amazing. So then, I did take out the launch video. But anyway, in the launch video, I do something really naughty, which is I pop my head up and I look down at this view, which is pretty cool. So this is, once we get to space, this is what happened. So I actually broke a promise to myself, which was I wouldn't do any acrobatics in space, because the one thing you can't get on the ground that you can get in space is the view, of course. So all of us on the crew made an agreement that we would appreciate the view and not spend our time throwing Skittles or M&Ms and jumping around too much. But once I got into weightlessness, it was kind of addictive, so I did anyway.
That's it. Wow.
I've never seen anything like this. I'll play that again because I also took up 3 little keepsakes for me. One was a little doll from my partner Vanessa. You can see a little teddy bear floating around. also took up a little Lego astronaut to represent the dreams of many people who wanted to fly to space. I know Lego was a very important part of many people's childhoods, so I flew that, and also, this one. And also a little 3D printed model of the planet Dove satellites, just so we could get another shot of an actual planet satellite floating around in space. So you can just watch this again.
That's it.
It was a lot of fun, but then one of the things that Bill Shatner had proposed was that we have a moment of camaraderie, as he called it. So we paused our space activities and went into the center for a group hug, which is a really nice thing to do, and we did that at Apogee. Actually, before I get to the landing, so one of the things that I did, which I found was really interesting, was I thought I would be clever. I remember I pointed out that photo of the spacecraft deployment where the Earth was at the top of the frame. I thought, well, as a space guy, what I should do is go the right way up, where there's no up and down in space, and I'll look at space with the Earth up the top and black down the bottom. And then this really strange thing happened, which is my brain malfunctioned, and I actually couldn't see anything. So sometimes if you bend over and you look between your legs or you're doing a handstand, how the world looks kind of funny? I think that's because it's your brain trying to assemble the picture, but the gravity's upside down and the things aren't what it expects, so it's a little bit of extra work for your optical nerve and your visual cortex to assemble a picture. So by being upside down in this really unusual scene that not many people have seen, I suddenly went blind and I couldn't see anything. And I'm looking out of the window and I'm like, kind of confused, and it was a very strange feeling. And when I came back down to the ground, I talked to someone about it and said, I'm so upset with myself because I wasted half of my time and I couldn't see anything. And I felt like I blew the experience, and they pointed out to me, actually, that is a real experience that I had, and a very strange one. So I think there was a lot going on there. So a couple of observations, just like these bright lights that are right in my eye here. Space is very, very bright. When you're above the atmosphere, the sun is much brighter than usual. I think you can see colors that you normally can't see because it's not filtered by the atmosphere. And also, even at 106 kilometers, the horizon is more than 1,000 kilometers away, which is not something we're really used to seeing. Space is, of course, black, and in the daytime when we flew and the sun is out, the blackness of space is an impossible black. It's blacker than any black you can see in this room, blacker than closing your eyes at night in a cave. It is the most deep black uniform color you could ever imagine, so it's also very strange. And then the atmosphere was this really bright, penetrating blue light. It was almost like a glowing sapphire. At the time of the day that we flew, the sunlight was directly reflecting off the atmosphere back into my eyes, so it was this bright, brilliant blue. So you take all of those strange things and you put them together, my brain was overloaded. And a question I have for astronauts who've flown on longer flights is, do you acclimatize to that? If I'd gone back for a second look, would my brain have relaxed and been able to see some stuff? So potentially it might be the case that short-term space flight is more impactful because you go up, you get shocked, and you don't recover. So I'm still, to this day, quite shocked by what I saw and felt up there. So anyway, after our group shot, I thought, okay, I will feel bad if I don't have any memories of this view, which I don't from the first half of the flight. I don't remember anything I saw because it was so strange. I flipped over so the Earth was down the bottom and space was up there, and then I could suddenly see, and I could see things, and it made sense. So my brain recovered, and I was able to look at the Earth then. It was such a strange experience to sort of be temporarily blinded by something that is so strange. So I looked up the numbers, and I think there is, of all the human beings that have ever lived, there might be as many as 100 billion human beings. There's about 7 billion on the planet, and historically, about 100 billion Homo sapiens have existed throughout the history of time. Of those 100 billion humans, fewer than 600 have seen this scene. And I feel like it's something that we're not evolutionarily designed to deal with. And so it is a profound experience. And as a space person who's been in this industry for 20 years, I was really worried that I would be desensitized to it. I've seen the pictures, we've all seen astronauts talk, right? We've seen their talks, we've seen the photos, we've seen videos, we've seen space movies. We know that when we see the Earth and the gradient of the atmosphere to the blackness of space. It's a scene we're all familiar with. We could potentially go, yeah, I've been there, seen it. You know, people go to Paris and they see the Eiffel Tower and it's smaller than they thought. So I have good news to report. It's not like that. It is in fact more strange and weird and scary than you could ever imagine. And it's brilliant and beautiful, and none of you will be disappointed. When you do go, I promise you, you won't be disappointed. So then we get to our landing phase. Coming. So New Shepard is a two-stage vehicle. There's the capsule and the booster. So that's actually Glenn got a lucky view, which none of us got, which was he got to see, from his window, he got to see the landing, which was pretty cool. So everyone, I think they spin the capsule, so we each get to share really cool views, but he got to see the landing and could see it when we came down. He could actually see the landed booster. And then we come down in parachutes.
And capsule touchdown. Welcome back, the newest astronaut.
That's a cool shot, by the way. So that's us returning to Earth, and you can see when we landed the cloud of dust thrown up by those retro rockets as we touched down on our pillow landing, as they call it. And that's a group shot of the wonderful, wonderful team at Blue Origin. They all drove out like crazy people in the afternoon to get out there for the shot, whatever they were doing. Most of the team that could came together, and it was wonderful to meet everyone on the team. I have to say, I obviously know a few Blue Origin people from this community, but being on site and meeting everyone, they are the nicest group of people you could ever meet. And it was very clear when we met everyone here how much it meant to them that we were flying and how they were vicariously living through us and also through their hero, Audrey Powers. But there was a group of people that really deeply cared about what they were doing and were deeply passionate about it. And I think for many of them it was as moving for them to see us go as it was for themselves. And I do hope in the future they get to fly. And then we got these really cool little astronaut pens, which are really neat. So I just wanted to just cap off then with like a recap of the history of I guess what you call it, non-professional astronauts. It's a term I just made up this morning. And since the year 2000, this first bowl is Dennis Tito, who went to the space station, I think in 2001. And so there have been 12 non-professional astronaut flights, mostly to the ISS, in the first 20 years of the 20th century, from 2001 to 2020. So 12 people went. If you jump to the middle of the year 2021, we have this. So just to blow that up, so I'll take that section down the bottom. This is 2021. The first ball on the bottom left is Richard Branson's flight on SSS Unity with 4 people, including another member of this community, Sricha Vandla, who, as many of you know. The next is Jeff Bezos' flight. Then we have Inspiration 4, also 4 more people. Then we have the wonderful film crew that just went to the ISS to film their movie. And then my flight up the top. If Clay had talked to me earlier, I would have also added some different colored balls for the upcoming flights. So I think you mentioned there's another crew. Clay, how many on that? 6. So that is, did I count correctly? 4, 16. That's 18 people in 2021 alone. If you add the 6 for the next New Shepard flight, potentially Tom Cruise going, I'm not sure. But we'll get to 24 people at least by the end of this year who've been to space above the Kármán line. And so that's more than double what happened in the previous 2 decades, which is really profound. And I think this is not an anomaly, this is not a one-off. I think I was actually out in 2004 watching the X Prize when Burt Rutan's team, qualified and then won, sending the first private astronaut above 100 kilometers. It's been 17 years since that day, but almost exactly October 4. So yes, 17 years and a few weeks. But we're now seeing real activity from multiple companies. We have SpaceX, we have, of course, activity from Soyuz in Russia, we have Virgin Galactic, and we have Blue Origin. So I think it's here to stay this time. And I think this graph will continue, and it will look like the one I showed earlier with increasing quantities of people. My prediction is that probably within the next 5 years, we will double the number of people that have been to space, and 50% of the people who have been to space will be citizen astronauts or non-professional astronauts. So I've learned that when I have these predictions, I should say them, so later on I get to say I was right and someone can tell me I was wrong, but you can quote me on that. That is my prediction for the future. So just to finish up, I have this really cool thing that I did. So secretly, my friends at Planet, we conspired to take a photo and a video from space of my own space launch. Because there was a few launch delays, the satellite moved over the horizon and we missed the takeoff, but we came around shortly after and we took some pictures of the landing sites. So this is about 12 p.m. Local time, and you can see in this dead center is the landed capsule, the RSS First Step, with the support team out there doing some work on it just before recovery, and that's a really cool shot. And then, even better, this is about 2 p.m. in the afternoon, the landed booster on the landing pad, also on the same site. And you can see some cars pulling up, and I think it's probably when we were doing the group photo looking at it actually. It might have been as people were starting to pull up for that massive group shot. As you can see, just on the bottom, a big crowd of people on the bottom ring of the pad. So, yeah, I think that's actually correct. I have to check the time, but I think it might be. And that's all I have for you. And, oh yeah, the zoom in of that shot there. For that, thank you for your time, and if we have questions, Claire, I don't know if we have time, but yeah. Do we have any questions? I can't quite see people. Oh, there we go. Kevin Shuby.
First, congratulations, Chris. I've known you personally for almost 20 years now. You said you would do it again. What would you do different this time besides not go upside down in the first 30 seconds?
That's a good question. I mean, so yeah, Kevin's question was, would I do it again and what would I do different? Well, I would obviously like to go longer and go for a longer trip. I'd like to build some permanent presence in space. I think we do need to start not just going up and down. Has anyone seen the movie Moana, the Disney movie? So that's actually the plot of this whole thing, right? They're on an island, they're running out of resources, there's a reef there with this crazy waves that break, and everyone's too scared to ever cross over the coral reef because it's dangerous. And they've learned over 100 years living on this island to never ever go over the coral reef. So New Shepard is kind of like being in a canoe, just rowing out to the coral reef and coming back. And going, hey, it's kind of cool over there, and then telling everyone on the land, hey, there's something out there, we should go, and then going, you're just a tourist, like, there's nothing there, just don't go, like, what are you doing? And so that's really the plot of that movie, and I think the plot of what we're doing right now. So I think what I want to do is go over that coral reef and go further. I want to row out past, my canoe, further than the Kármán line. I want to go into deep space. And I think the thing, actually, I forgot to mention, that captivated me once I went the right way up, the thing that really spoke to me when I was in space was the deep blackness, and felt this irresistible, if I close my eyes, I can still feel this pull into space. I think as a species, we need to leave home eventually, and I want to help make that happen. I want to travel out deeper into space, and just like Moana in that movie, find new lands that exist beyond the coral reef that we're all so scared to cross. So that's my answer. Yeah, down the front here.
Thank you very much, Chris, for an amazing presentation. And I can say I watched your launch 5 days before traveling to Dubai for the SCGC on the 13th of October. So actually, it was an amazing experience sitting with the behind the screen and watching an amazing launch and then meet you in person. So it's like a dream comes true. So the question here is, having traveled to space with a clear view of our planet, what are your plans towards how you're going to support the action towards the climate change, and how are you going to support students and young people, professionals, to serve best they can make our planet more sustainable? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I feel like that's a little bit of a leading question. So there were two parts to the question. Did I come back with a commitment to help steward our planet? And the answer is, of course, yes. I mean, it's just so beautiful when you see it up there. And I think for me, having worked at Planet for so long and done many of the things, I think that commitment is already there. And it was nice to sort of renew my vows in a sense to say, I really do believe in what we're doing in this community. And then to give back, so I mentioned at the very beginning, this is the community that I grew up in. And this is who we are. This is the group of people here that is taking the human race to space. And I wanted to give back to the community in the same way that I received help when I was a student. I got a small scholarship to come here. It was very small, but it made a difference and allowed me to fly. I think it was to Texas, was where the conference was, and actually afford to go. So I did have set up a small scholarship for Space Generation to help bring delegates to both the IAC and the Space Symposium in April. So twice a year, send groups of students to this thing, because I think our future rests with you, and the more of you that are here and helping grow our small canoes, the more we can get done. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for sharing those wonderful remarks and reflections. I'm full of dad jokes, so really impressive. It's amazing for me to have watched Chris's career arc here. To know friends, by the way, that have flown on these pioneering missions is just super important and powerful to me, having worked in this industry for almost 30 years. So I'm so excited that Chris is one of our pioneering early astronauts aboard New Shepard, and I'm sure he's not done yet when it comes to space, so lots more to come. And also, by the way, Chris is a musician. He's been doing some really amazing work under his Dr. Crispy pseudonym, and I'm sure more amazing art and music is going to come out of this. It's been kind of a really wonderful sideline to the New Shepard experience. We've now been flying for art aboard our parachute covers. We look to do more interesting artwork that will have flown to space as we kind of push now into this new frontier. So thank you guys for coming this morning. Really appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of the IAC. Cheers.